So I have this vivid memory of a car ride from a few years ago. It was the middle of May, so it was beautiful out. And me and my dad pull away from my apartment, and neither of us are talking to one another. I guess we really didn't have much to say. And I've got the window down because I need some fresh air, even though the AC's on. And we come down my side street and we go to make a right onto the main road by my house. And once we do, through that silence, I end up starting to hear this slight clinking noise coming from the back. And at first, I didn't really think much of it. But as we go down the road, we hit a couple of more bumps and the clinking sound starts getting louder. And then when I realized what it was, my heart kind of sank. I got a pit in my stomach and I started sweating. That morning, I was actually on my way to rehab. I had asked my dad to drive me there because they told me that you weren't allowed to leave your car in the parking lot once you were there. I guess they were afraid that at some point you were going to look out the window, see your car, see how easy it was to just leave, and you would jump ship. And the sound that I was listening to was actually probably about 30 empty liquor bottles in a big-ass garbage bag in the trunk of his car that we had taken from my apartment. The reason why we took them is that morning I wanted to clean up a little bit before we left. So I had taken all the empties and thrown them in the garbage bag, and the couple that still had a little bit of liquor in them, I dumped down the sink. And my plan was I was going to leave them at the curb so that when the garbage day came, they would pick that up. But my dad said to me, why don't you just let me take those for you and you could throw them in my trunk? And I didn't say anything. I just nodded because I knew what he was implying. He didn't want my sister to find them and worry any more than she already was. My apartment was actually in the basement apartment of the house that my sister and brother-in-law owned. So he was afraid that they would come across all of them. You know, and that car ride was pretty ominous because it's just this silent drive of me listening to all the shitty decisions that I've made in the past couple of years rattling around in the back of the trunk. But as shitty as the car ride was, you know, that was the moment where I really think I realized that something needed to change. Kind of hit me how crappy the circumstances I had put myself in were. You know, and not that things needed to change, that I needed to change. So, as crappy as that memory is, it's something I will definitely remember forever. Hey guys, it's Brian from Quit and Conquer. I'm making this video today because I wanted to share my own experience with going to rehab for drug and alcohol abuse. The reason why I'm doing that is, you know, I didn't really hear much about people's experiences with rehab before I went in, and even after I got out and started talking to people who were in sobriety, living clean, going to meetings and such, I still didn't really hear much about people's experiences with rehab. And I think a lot of people have questions on whether or not they need to go to rehab. I think a lot of people, there's a stigma in regards to going to rehab. And I just wanted to talk about my own experiences, hoping that, you know, if someone is on the fence or someone's wondering what it's like or wondering really what the benefits are from it, they might be able to take something from what I have to say. So I don't really want to talk in this video much about my entire story with substance abuse or really how I got the whole story of how I got to the point of having to go into rehab. But to kind of summarize things, for a really long time, I was abusing alcohol and a bunch of other substances. And everything had kind of started coming to a head where I was for a long time on this slow path downward. Um, and right before I was about to kind of lose everything, where I was about to fuck up all the relationships with my family for good, right before I was about to lose my job, right before my health started getting like really bad, um, through some pressure from a couple family members and their support, and kind of me finally looking in the mirror and just not being happy at all with what I saw. Um, I decided that, I needed to make the change, and I wasn't sure what rehab was going to entail, but I had tried several times before to kind of cut myself off while I was living normal life, and that hadn't worked. And I had a lot of objections about going to rehab, like I was worried about losing my job, and I was worried about the lost income and how I was going to pay for my apartment, and I was worried about the cost of rehab, how I was going to get my dog and my cat taken care of for the month while I went in. But I quickly, along with the people who helped me get into rehab, solved all of those problems. So I had literally nothing left to complain about, nothing left that was stopping me. So I went. And honestly, there were a lot of things throughout rehab that I thought didn't benefit me at all. And when I came out, I really questioned whether or not it was worth it. But in retrospect, it was really the best decision I ever made, and kind of set the tone for the whole rest of my recovery. So the things that I got out of it, the reasons why it benefited me might be surprising, but they benefited me nonetheless. I want to start off by talking about what the actual rehab facility was like that I went to. Because, I mentioned before that I was really afraid of the cost of going to a rehab facility. And I didn't really have much money. I didn't have insurance. And although a couple of my family members were willing to help me front the cost of going to a rehab facility, that's not something I really wanted to ask for or was comfortable with them doing. So I did a little research and ended up finding out that there was a facility that was close by me that was state run that you can go to for little to no cost, especially if you didn't have insurance. So I called them up. I asked as few questions as possible because I didn't want to really get any answers that I didn't like and end up backing out. And I went. And what I ended up experiencing was it was kind of like a cross between, it was a little bit jail-like, and it was a little bit like mental health institution-like. Because it was state-run, you could go in there willingly and admit yourself, but a lot of the other people that were in there were either mandated by drug courts, or it was part of their sentence when they came out of jail, or what have you. So it was an interesting group of people, to say the least. What it was actually like in there was, even though it was the middle of May, for some reason, it was cold and it was dark. And, the days were very structured. There was a lot of group sessions and one-to-one counseling, and, everything had a time block. And then mixed in with some free time, which basically was watching TV in this like recreation room that they had. The food was very bad. You know, the bed that they had you sleep on was like this plastic mattress, I guess, so that they can clean them easily in between the people who stayed there. And I'll never forget, it was like the first day that I showed up, I got brought to my room and they didn't really tell me anything about what I should do or where to go from there. They gave me my bag back after they went through it and took out everything that I wasn't actually allowed to have in there. And they gave me a sheet and a pillow and a pillowcase and let me in my room and then kind of left. And I was standing there with this sheet that was just like a top sheet. There wasn't a fitted sheet. And I'm looking at the bed and I go and I start like trying to tuck this top sheet underneath. And I start realizing that because the mattress is plastic, it's so goddamn slippery that this isn't going to stay under the mattress and it's just going to slip around all night. So I'm going to end up sitting here with my face on this kind of nasty plastic mattress. And then one of the guys, who I guess was like bunk next door, ended up coming by and he saw what I was doing and he was like, I guess you've never been to jail before or been here before. And I said I hadn't. And he came over and he didn't really say much, if anything else. He took this sheet and if you suspended it on top of the mattress and really pulled it, and you could tie like a small knot around the bedpost, you could get this mattress so that it wasn't actually like tucked under the mattress at all. It was just suspended on top. But because it was tied to all four of these bedposts, it wouldn't move or go anywhere. And I appreciated that. But that was another moment where I ended up realizing, you know, like where I was and things kind of sunk in. You know, but a typical day in that rehab ended up looking like you woke up super early, you know, and I would wake up even earlier than everyone else because if you didn't, by the time a couple people would shower, there was no hot water left. So it would just be ice cold. So if you woke up earlier than everybody else and you got into the shower to get on the med line, you would actually have a somewhat warm shower. And then you'd go on the med line, you'd get whatever medication they had prescribed you if you needed it. And then in between that, you had a little bit of downtime. Usually I would go back to my room and I started a journal while I was in there because I kind of wanted to document what I was experiencing while I experienced it, you know, because I didn't want to ever really forget that moment or those moments. I wanted to remember how bad it was because I didn't want to have to go back to it. And then you would go to breakfast and you'd eat whatever they gave you. Typically, I didn't really eat breakfast. I would just drink coffee and then another small block of downtime. And then you would start the whole day's group sessions, which was literally a block of group sessions, a little bit of time off, a block of group sessions, a little bit of time off, maybe a one-to-one meeting with your counselor, more group sessions, then lunch, and then you'd repeat that until dinner. And then after dinner, usually you would go to another longer group meeting. When I was in there, they used to apparently have, and maybe they do again, have AA or NA come into the facility and run a meeting so that you kind of get acquainted with that because they recommend you start going to these meetings after you get out. But because it was still in the midst of COVID when I went into rehab, they actually couldn't bring anybody into the facility. So we would do these virtual meetings where, to be honest, like 90% of us would end up just falling asleep because of half of the reason was probably because of the medication we were on. And the other half of the reason was just listening to people talk all day. And then you had another little bit of free time, and then you'd go to sleep, and you'd repeat this process every day. And, that got monotonous after a while. And throughout the experience, it was kind of scary. It was kind of lonely. And it was honestly a little boring. Like, you couldn't wait to get out. But at the same time, as I was experiencing all those other emotions, I was also experiencing hope, because I knew that even if at the time I didn't think that being in there was helping me all that much, I knew that this was kind of like a new beginning for me. And then eventually I was going to get out, and I was committed to doing things right this time. So I want to be pretty honest about my experiences inside the rehab that I was at, and going over the things that I don't think really benefited me from going there. It might be a little surprising, but it was kind of like the whole program itself. And that's for a couple of different reasons. I think mainly it was because my brain was so foggy from just having quit drinking and doing everything else I was doing. I wasn't really able to listen or process what they were kind of telling me. It was also pretty repetitive, and I guess that kind of would help with you being foggy and not being able to process things, but it kind of just made me really want to like tune things out. And the other reason was I don't think I was really ready to listen to any of that. Like, I knew I needed to change. I knew I needed to quit. And I kind of bounced back and forth for a while on whether it was something I wanted, even though I knew I needed to. But I didn't want to hear a lot of the stuff that they had to say. I participated and I did what they asked of me, but I really didn't want to take in anything that I didn't want what they were offering, I had a lot of objections with all of it, and I had a lot of reservations, and that kind of made it so that when they were talking about coping mechanisms and dealing with stress and anger management and triggers and relapse, and because that's what most of the group sessions and lessons were over. I don't think I really got much out of it at that point. But what I did get out of it was a whole lot. And that came mostly from the environment that I put myself in rather than the program that they offered at the rehab facility. So first and foremost, like, the main benefit I think I got out of going to rehab was 30 days or 28 days without drinking or using drugs. If I was on the outside, that was the longest bit that I had without drinking or using drugs, probably since I was 14 or 15 years old. And that little break gave me the clarity that I needed to see that I was able to do this. It made me realize that I wanted to do this. And I was able to get over my initial withdrawals while having a full-time medical staff there, which was something that I was worried about because I was drinking so heavily and so consistently. So you had full-time medical staff at the rehab facility, and I talked about a little bit before about how it was a state-run facility, and I kind of alluded to how crappy the environment really was. And I think that was good for me because it made it very clear that this was not something I ever wanted to go back to, that I was ever going to go back to. It kind of, maybe it was one of those like kind of scare you straight type of moments. But for me, I think I needed that. I needed like the world to kind of come crumbling in on me and show me that, or ask me, whether is this what you want your future to look like, or do you want to change things? Because you can change things. And that fear and that uncomfortability and that drive to get out turned into a drive to change my life in a way that made sure that I would never be in a situation like that again. They talk a lot about in AA and NA about how important it is to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And I think that those 28 days inside that rehab facility was my first experience with learning to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because I was extremely uncomfortable. I, up until that point, hadn't really ever admitted that I had a problem, even though I knew I did have a problem. And, the environment itself was uncomfortable. Like I said, the sleeping conditions weren't great. Food wasn't great. Showering wasn't great. The people I were around were somewhat sketchy at times. But it taught me that even though I was extremely uncomfortable, I could get through it. If I just put my head down and pushed through, I was more than able and more than capable of making the best of a crappy situation. Another thing that I think was extremely important for me and beneficial for me while I was in the rehab facility is, in all that downtime, there really wasn't much to do. And it really gave me a good amount of time to contemplate what I wanted my life to look like from there on out, without all the distractions of normal daily life. I think if I was trying to do it on the outside, or if I had done some outpatient rehab facility, I would have ended up just kind of being distracted by, your day-to-day activities. Whereas this felt like a huge reset for me, and it gave me that space I needed to look towards the future and really, really wonder what it was going to look like, begin planning, and just stop to collect my thoughts. Because for so many years, I was really kind of avoiding all those thoughts. I used because I wanted to distract myself. And now, at first I had to kind of confront the fact that I wasn't distracted anymore. And then I had to figure out what I was going to do instead of being distracted. So that was definitely another huge benefit I had from attending the inpatient rehab facility. I talked about how I thought that the program itself wasn't really beneficial for me, but I do want to say the one part of the program that I really did get something out of was the one-to-one counseling. I had a really good counselor while I was in there, and I think the main benefit I got from the relationship I ended up building with her is she didn't view me as less than, and I could feel that, I could tell that she had faith in me, which let me have faith in myself. Because even when I was on the outside, I know my family was supporting me, and I know that they knew that I could get better. But after so many years of behaving poorly and making bad decisions, it was kind of hard to get that same sense of faith that I got from an outside perspective someone who dealt with this day in and day out. She just treated me like a normal person. And that was huge for me, because it made me feel like a normal person in an abnormal place. And it made me confident that I could change things, that I could turn everything around, and that this wasn't going to be forever. So I'd say if there's one part of the program that I definitely got something out of, it would be my experience with one-to-one counseling. Yeah, so if you're watching this video and you're looking for a recommendation on whether or not you should go to rehab, I can't really make that decision for you. And I can't really make any recommendations on whether you should or you should not go. All I could really do is share my experience and the reasons why I decided that it was beneficial for me. And hope that you're able to make a more informed decision for yourself. But I will say that your number one priority should be getting clean and getting sober. So if you are going to lose your job, or you do have to jump through hoops to figure things out, who's going to take care of your animals or who's going to take care of your kids while you go in, you've got to take care of yourself before you can take care of anyone else. And you should do the best job that you can to figure those things out, because if you have any people in your life who care at all, I'm sure they would be willing to help. So try and not let things like that hold you back from going in if it's something that you think you could benefit from, because there are options. There are things that you can do that will make it easier and more manageable. So I just want to thank everybody for watching this video. The channel's new, so I would love it if you like this video and subscribe to the channel. We're going to be trying to put out content more regularly. Here, if you're unfamiliar with our website, you could visit us at quitandconquer.com. That's quit with a T. And we put out free resources there for people who are in recovery from substance abuse, alcohol abuse, typically in the form of blog articles. Please like, subscribe, and hit that little bell icon so that you actually get notified when we post new content. I appreciate everyone watching and hope you have a good day.